being propelled by 2 solid fuel booster rockets and its 3 main hydrogen-burning engines. Those are the small engines at the tail of the spacecraft itself. The pilot and the co-pilot were throttling up just before, in the seconds before the explosion occurred. It was not immediately determined if the source of the explosion was one of the boosters or in the main engine system. It may be a long while before anyone knows. There had been a 2-hour delay in the launch of the space shuttle this morning because of the extreme cold for Florida, about 28 degrees. There were icicles over much of the space shuttle and the apparatus that gets it into launch. NASA delayed the launch for 2 hours this morning, made a number of close inspections, and then as the weather began to heat up, NASA felt it could go ahead with the launch. It did. Everything looked all right for about 65 to 68 seconds. Then there was an indication only, as we saw the slow-motion videotape later, an early indication that something might be wrong, and then suddenly 72 to 75 seconds in, a major explosion and a ball of flame. Mission Control in Houston said very early after the tragedy that it had no indication of any trouble aboard the spacecraft. The last words heard from the spacecraft were, "Roger, throttle up." That meant that they were going to take the throttle from about 60 to 65% of power on up for power as they tried to get the space shuttle thrown forward closer to orbit. Keep in mind, as we pointed out several times, that the space shuttle's own engines are not enough to get it off the launch pad and throw it toward orbit. That's the reason they have those solid rocket boosters. The solid rocket boosters, after they do their job of getting the whole payload off the ground and headed toward outer space, they drop away. The space shuttle's engines then continue on, drawing on the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen in the main tank to put the spacecraft on into orbit. 2 senators and a congressman, we're now told, have flown in space, and they had this reaction to today's tragedy.
There is risk. That risk is taken by each one of us every day, and that risk is understood by all the members of a crew that climb into a loaded spaceship.
And I think we should push ahead after we have determined the cause. Obviously, we should not fly until we have determined the cause of this particular failure. But I think we need to look at all of the successes, the remarkable safety record that the space program has had, the benefits that come from it, and the crew members that I knew so well. I would expect that they would want us to go ahead with the space program after we have gone through the proper investigations and analysis and know what happened.
You say this is a day we've managed to avoid for a quarter of a century. You say we've talked about before and speculated on, and it finally has arrived. We hope we could push this day back forever. But the people that were on the flight today carried our hopes and dreams along with them, and they'll live forever in our memories.
John Glenn, and who can forget those early space shots, and particularly the first one that John Glenn went up in, and there were moments of tension and extreme danger, but at that time, no astronaut lost his life. The first astronauts to lose their lives on duty were the 3 who died on the pad as part of the Apollo program in 1967, and then until today, no American astronaut or space Voyager had lost his or her life in an actual flight. 7 Americans were aboard today. Now, here's what we're going to try to do. Before the NASA news conference, which is due to come up in about 7 minutes. NASA had scheduled a news conference at Cape Canaveral for 3:30 Eastern Time, about 6 or 7 minutes from now. We're going to try to, for those who have just joined us in progress, or those of you who've only seen or heard bits or pieces of the coverage, to go through the launch as it happened this morning, slow motion of the critical moments just before the explosion and the explosion. And then we'll be going to the NASA news conference at Cape Canaveral. First, videotape of the launch and liftoff, which had been 2 hours delayed this morning by ice.
6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
program confirmed. Challenger now heading down range. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Challenger, go at throttle up. 1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
And the spacecraft, in increasingly small pieces of debris, rained down into the ocean off the coast of Florida. Now, we want to use our small model. We're going to give a slow motion videotape look at what happened. But before we do so, a review. This is a scale model. This is the Space Shuttle itself. Keep in mind the crew has only a small area in which it's actually housed for most of the time. Most of the Space Shuttle is in the cargo area. Down below that, the cargo area that opens up, that's where the satellites are launched from once the shuttle gets into orbit. The Space Shuttle itself sets aboard a huge fuel tank, about 500,000 pounds of liquid oxygen and hydrogen. This fuel is what fuels the Space Shuttle's own engines, the 3 engines right in the tail of the Space Shuttle. But those 3 engines are not enough to get the Space Shuttle up into orbit. So on launch, the Space Shuttle's own engines have to be going, drawing on the liquid oxygen and hydrogen fuel, and the 2 solid rocket boosters off to the side of the main fuel tank are part of the original launch configuration. These are the solid rocket boosters. At launch, the solid rocket boosters go, the Space Shuttle's own 3 engines go, and to get it off the pad, then the commander of the Space Shuttle throttles back to about 60% in order to get maximum effect. The aerodynamics of the situation require him, with gravity figured in, to throttle back to about 65% of power. Then at a certain stage after this whole apparatus, the solid rocket boosters, the main tank, and the shuttle itself get up and make a slight turn. Plan is, and always has been, for the Space Shuttle commander to throttle up. Those are the last words from the Space Shuttle, Roger, throttling up. And it was shortly after that that the whole thing exploded. Now watch on the slow motion videotape, because down in here, in what we will call the left, in the lower side of the left solid rocket booster, you will first see some little indications of possible flames could have been caused by vapors, and then the whole explosion occurred. Let's go now to the slow motion videotape as we wait and prepare for NASA's news conference. You see the little flame in the middle left-hand side. Then the beginnings of an explosion. Just exactly where it's happening, hard to tell. Could be in the solid rocket boosters, could be in the main tank. Then, once the explosion, the flames explosion, reach the main tank, which has that highly explosive, highly volatile liquid hydrogen, the Space Shuttle is obliterated. No ejection seats aboard the Space Shuttle. The early Space Shuttles had ejection seats, but after the first 3 or 4 flights, ejection seats, because of the increasing numbers of people put aboard the Space Shuttle and the belief that ejection seats wouldn't do any good, there were no ejection seats on this Space Shuttle. Note in the upper right-hand quarter of the screen, I know that that's gone off of your screen for the moment, there was a piece of what is believed to be the right-hand solid rocket booster. You see in the upper right-hand quarter, that's it, a piece, if not indeed the entire, what is believed to be the right-hand side solid rocket booster. Remember that the early indication of trouble was on the lower left-hand solid rocket booster side. No ejection seats aboard the Space Shuttle today. As Leo Krupp, our consultant with CBS News from years past, has pointed out, there is a moment, a second, one's tempted to say a nanosecond, but just a few seconds in which the pilot of the Space Shuttle, the commander and the pilot or co-pilot, who's monitoring. When he sees a red light, there's a few seconds there where if he knows there is trouble, that he can have the spacecraft itself separate from all of this fuel and the solid rocket boosters. That did not happen today as far as anyone can determine. NASA at Mission Control in Houston simply did not know in the minutes right after the explosion what had happened or why it had happened. But there was no indication that during those moments when the pilot could have separated the space shuttle from all of this fuel, there's no indication that he even attempted to do so. We simply don't know whether he had even the slightest indication of trouble aboard the spacecraft. One wants to keep in mind, need we remind ourselves, that we're still in the infancy of space exploration and travel, that we're in the very, historically, the very earliest seconds of space exploration. And that while we've learned a lot about spaceships, fuel, mixing liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, computers, telemetry, aerodynamics, and all of that, that we only know such a tiny amount, really, about how it all works, where we can proceed from here. And it's in that atmosphere, from a, one doesn't want to say historical standpoint, but from that atmosphere that those 7 Americans were aboard the Space Shuttle today. One of the things that these flights is designed to do is to increase man's knowledge about space flight, which is quite a different thing, a much more dangerous thing, certainly now, than flight in the Earth's own atmosphere. Now, NASA has put back its news conference, which was scheduled to begin about a minute ago. Had originally been scheduled for 3:30 this afternoon Eastern Time. NASA has now put back that news conference until 4 o'clock. We're also told that Vice President Bush and Senator John Glenn, whom you heard a few moments ago, the former astronaut, Senator John Glenn, Vice President Bush and Senator John Glenn have just taken off from Andrews Air Force Base for Cape Canaveral. President Reagan had relayed word earlier through his spokesman, Larry Speaks, at or about the time it was said the President would be delaying his State of the Union message, that Vice President Bush would be going to Florida. One wants a gentle reminder that while this morning's launch took place, as they do from Cape Canaveral, Florida, that Mission Control is in Houston, but today's news conference, which we are now told will be happening roughly 28 minutes from now at 4 o'clock, today's news conference is to be held at Cape Canaveral. Now, we will, of course, through the afternoon, for those of you who may be coming home from work or coming home from school, as part of our CBS News live coverage through the afternoon, and very shortly, we'll be showing those of you who have seen it, and those of you who are just coming in and may not have seen it, the videotapes of what actually happened this morning when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded about a minute and 12 to 15 seconds after launch, with all 7 Americans aboard and presumed killed. The crew members aboard that flight, the commander, 46-year-old Francis Scobie, the pilot, 40-year-old Michael J. Smith, Judith Resnick, 36 years old, Ronald McNair, 35 years old, 39-year-old Ellison Onizuka from Hawaii, Gregory Jarvis, and the schoolteacher from New Hampshire, Krista McAuliffe. All were aboard the Challenger when it became that ball of flame this morning. We thought it worth showing you a comparison again between today's tragedy and the Space Shuttle Challenger's flight that it made successfully last fall. We have pictures now, what you're going to see are pictures that contrast the launch of that flight on October 30th with today's disastrous launch.
Main engine start.
This morning's launch on the left.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Now control.
Roger, roll, Challenger.
Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles. engines throttling up. 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Roger, go at throttle up.
1 minute, 15 seconds.
As you can see, in today's launch on the left, there was an explosion, perhaps a small one or several small ones at first, then a larger one. It occurred about 1 minute and 12 seconds, 12 to 15 seconds into the launch. Now, in the successful launch on the right-hand side of your screen, the booster rockets would not separate for perhaps another 50 seconds, past the 2-minute mark, until the launch was more than 2 minutes into flight. You can see back on October 30th, this same shuttle, one of 4, the Space Shuttle Challenger, disappeared on into outer space after its launch, and after jettisoning as scheduled its solid booster rockets. The one this morning became a ball of flame and then smoke trailing debris. Those of you who've been with us throughout our live coverage today, I know, have seen the slow motion of what happened this morning, but we want to show it again now. For one thing, we've had some calls and we've discussed among ourselves about the very important time, as Leo Krupp has pointed out to us from Los Angeles, before the big ball of flame, when it appears down on the lower left-hand solid booster rocket, some indication of trouble. That may be what you see when you go to this slow motion videotape. So let's take a look now at the slow motion videotape. Look in the center, slightly left lower part of your screen. 2 little indications of some difficulty with the solid rocket booster. Perhaps something seems to be wrong down there. 2 small explosions. Nothing in the way of explosion is minor when you have one of these launches, and then it just mushrooms out into this tremendous ball of fire. Leo Krupp, in Los Angeles, you've watched this with us a number of times this afternoon. What are the first things that the NASA investigators are going to be looking for?
Well, I imagine the first thing they're going to be trying to do, Dan, is find out why they had the anomaly of this, appears to be the anomaly on this left-hand solid rocket booster. And hopefully they'll be able to determine what failed and then how that ignition point, it appears that ignition point was up somewhere on the belly of the shuttle, up around somewhere where the umbilicals come in from the main tank. And also any other contributing factors, such as what did the throttle up contribute to it? When you throttle up these engines, you change the pressure pattern around the nozzles of the solid rocket boosters, and also if there's any weather factors that might have entered into this. As Dr. Payne pointed out, this is a thorough investigation. It's going to take a long, long time. They're going to have to look at all their telemetry data, look at all the pieces they recover of debris, and see if there's any clues there, and try to piece this together. But it's going to be a very time-consuming and very painstaking problem. It's going to take a long time to do. It's going to take them several months, I'm sure, to put all these pieces together.
Leo, is Dr. Thomas Payne still there with you?
Yes, he is.
Dr. Payne, have you talked to anyone with NASA during the day?
No, I heard about this right after it happened and immediately turned to my source of information, which is television news, of course. I must say, it's a terrible thing to have happen, but I was very proud of the way in which the American press was able to give the people an immediate look, and I think the coverage shows great professionalism in your organization, Dan.
Well, thank you. Far be it for us to interrupt a compliment, but I do want to concentrate on our coverage. And Dr. Payne, I believe you said that you were somewhere checking on the results of the Voyager 2 flyby Uranus. Where was that, and what was the reaction there of those involved with the Voyager mission when they heard about the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion?
Well, no, I had left the Jet Propulsion Laboratory by the time of the accident.
I see, Dr. Payne. Bruce Hall, whom I believe you know, our veteran space correspondent in Florida, is standing by at Cape Canaveral. Bruce, what effect is this disaster expected to have on the space program, both manned and unmanned?
Well, it could have a real effect on the program, particularly the shuttle program, of course, because we've had 4 shuttles which we're operating with, and we've still fallen a little bit behind schedule, Dan, with that. And there has been tremendous pressure on NASA to keep those 4 shuttles operating and to keep on schedule. And they've still fallen behind. Now that we have lost one of the major shuttles, and we have lost the Challenger. This is the flight, the shuttle that has been used 10 of the 25 launches. It has been the Challenger. The Challenger has been the workhorse. The Challenger has been the shuttle that has had the least amount of technical troubles. So, therefore, it is going to be a major effect on the program from that standpoint. Now, there was not another shuttle scheduled to be launched until the first week in March. But it was a time, ironically, when NASA was a little concerned about the launch, because in March, they were going to try to launch 2 shuttles within 1 week. And for the very first time, they were going to put a Centaur rocket aboard one of the shuttles. This is one that would have liquid fuel, something that has never been done before. And
say that again to me, Bruce. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
Okay. One of the concerns that NASA had for the future, and this is something that was going to take place in May, I said March, in May, when NASA was going to launch one of the shuttles, and aboard that shuttle was going to be a Centaur rocket. Now, the crucial thing here is that the Centaur rocket, which we have fired from a number of places before, but the Centaur rocket that was going to be aboard the shuttle was going to have liquid propellants. And once again, we were in a position where we were talking about highly volatile substances to be put into space. And this was something that NASA has been real concerned about. There was very little concern about the launch today because it was the Challenger, and they were so pleased with the Challenger. They were sort of diverting some of their attention and looking forward, although the concern is always for safety here. Let me emphasize that. They were looking forward and trying to work out all of the problems in regard to the May launch, which was going to be another step forward for the program. And that was something that there was real concern about with NASA. And now, the fact that we have lost one, plus the fact that we'll have to have an extensive investigation. NASA will want to insist upon a very extensive investigation into this to see where the program goes from here. And while there probably will be some criticism, it is everyone's opinion here at the Kennedy Space Center, the program, of course, will go on. It will go on with 3 shuttles. There will be a strong move to bring forth a 4th shuttle. But there is a problem in trying to get a 4th vehicle, the 4th orbiter, in that the place where the shuttles are manufactured now is being geared up for the production of the B-1 bombers. So you can see we have several problems in connection with this terrible tragedy of today that are going to impact on the future of the program, and it is going to delay several of the missions. It is going to have a devastating effect on the shuttle program in the future. It is going to mean that we are, in all likelihood, going to have to delay our missions to Jupiter and delay probably for at least a year on our mission to Jupiter, which is a setback for NASA, is a serious setback for the entire space program. So we have something to deal with in the program that goes beyond just this tragedy, and that is the entire future of the program, Dan.
Bruce, for those who don't follow the space program anywhere nearly as closely as you do, you're talking about this Centaur rocket that was planned to be taken up on a space shuttle flight in May, correct?
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
Someone here said, well, how can they take a rocket up aboard the rocket? Well, again, using our scale model here, you have the space shuttle itself, its main liquid, well, it's liquid fuel tanks, and then it's solid fuel boosters. These fall away. This tank eventually falls away, and the shuttle goes on into orbit. Remember, again, that the shuttle has this cargo bay, and that's what the cargo bay is designed for. Bruce, help me as we go along here, if you will. That
is correct.
A rocket was to be launched out of here. The plan for the May launch of the space shuttle was to put a Centaur rocket and see if it could be launched out of this cargo bay, correct?
That is correct, and that is part of really what NASA was calling the exciting future of the space program and the shuttle program, in that they were trying to make major advances in the program. And among the major advances includes things which bring safety into it and real safety problems, because they've been dealing with the liquid propellants aboard this Centaur rocket to make certain that they could do this and do this safely. And it was one of the major concerns, and it was expected to be a big advancement. The second advancement, that same time they were going to do that, they were going to attempt to launch a second shuttle in the same week, so that we were going to have 2 shuttle launches within 1 week. That is the reason that it was so important that today we were to launch a shuttle from what is known as Pad 39B. We have always, with the previous 24 shuttle missions, gone off from Pad 39A. But with the refurbishing of the second pad, that meant that the space program would take a major leap forward. They would be able to try new programs and be able to make further advances. And this was part of what Dick Scobie said, the commander of this flight, and his desire and his hope and his saying, as he told several people in his last days, that the real future is the development of outer space, and we have to be able to develop outer space. And this was the way that NASA was going to do it. So you have here, Dan, not only a tragedy today with the explosion aboard the Challenger and with everything that has occurred here, but you have a tragedy for the entire space program and for the future of the space program. And this is something that I'm sure in the coming weeks and the coming months we're going to hear a tremendous amount about, because it is going to obviously delay the shuttle program. It is going to delay trips to Jupiter like they had planned, and it is going to delay some of the long-range programs that they already have on the drawing board.
Bruce, I'm reminded that one of the many purposes of the Space Shuttle program was to get a new powerful telescope into outer space, away from the Earth's atmosphere. And it always was a very exciting prospect, I think, to many Americans, that to get a telescope, this had not yet happened. Some of the previous space shots had been designed to help it along, but part of the Space Shuttle program is to put a telescope into space where so much more can be seen. And once that telescope got into space, NASA was always pointing out that humans, for the first time, with a telescope aboard the shuttle in outer space, would be able to see many thousands of times much more of the cosmos than any human had ever been able to see before, because, of course, with earthbound telescopes, one is hampered by the Earth's atmosphere. All of that part of the Space Shuttle program. Leo Krupp in Los Angeles, could the pyrotechnics that are supposed to lead to separation of the solid rocket boosters from the spacecraft, could those pyrotechnics have been pre-ignited, and could that have been part of the problem? We're raising questions here. We want to emphasize that we simply don't know what caused the explosion aboard the shuttle, but could that have been one possible reason?
Well, I assume not, Dan, because if a separation sequence had been initiated and you actually blew the explosive bolts, you would have a normal separation. You wouldn't have a catastrophic explosion.
Leo Krupp, we want to show the videotape again, partly because we're eager for you to see it as often as possible in hopes that you might pick up some other clues, or it might raise questions in your mind. And also, we continue to say it, we say it because it's true. At this time of day, so many people are coming home from school or work or joining us in our coverage. The Space Shuttle Challenger blew up between 72 and 75 seconds after launch today at Cape Canaveral, Florida. This, the configuration of the Space Shuttle, the shuttle itself, the liquid fuel tank filled with liquid oxygen and hydrogen, something the Soviets have had trouble doing. This is the major fuel tank. The solid rocket boosters off to the side. As we play the videotape for you, the second time in slow motion, you will see the suspicious area along the left side of one of those solid rocket boosters. This was the scene this morning.
And liftoff.
Everything seemed fine for the liftoff.
The 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Now control.
Roger, roll, Challenger.
Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
The fireball had happened. Debris begins to fall after the explosion. This part of the Space Shuttle overall vehicle, as it trailed smoke coming down into the ocean a short ways east of the launch site. You heard Commander Francis Scobie was told by Mission Control in Houston to throttle up.
Very carefully at the situation.
Then he said, oh, Roger, he was
Obviously
throttling
a
up.
major malfunction.
Mission Control in Houston, stunned, doesn't know what has happened, says,
We have no downlink.
obviously, there's been a malfunction, as they called it. No downlink, no communication. By this time, horror was setting in at Mission Control in Houston and everywhere as debris began to rain down into the sea. Now, the critical moments in slow motion. Look for the indication of explosion of small flame down low on the left-hand middle side of your picture. There they are. This is just before the major explosion. Then the igniting of the main fuel tank where all that liquid hydrogen, 500,000 pounds of it, goes up. The spacecraft was traveling at close to 2,000 miles an hour at the time. It may not be an important point, but will someone please check that the speed was about 2,000 miles an hour. Those aboard the spacecraft today, commander and his pilot, co-pilot. The commander was Francis Dick Scobie, 46 years old, from the state of Washington, married and with 2 children. This was his second mission and his first command of a shuttle mission. He is a retired major from the United States Air Force. Michael Smith, the pilot, 40 years old, from Beaufort, North Carolina, married, 3 children. This was his first mission. He is a commander in the United States Navy and is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy. Mike Smith. Judith Resnick, mission specialist, 36 years old, PhD from Akron, Ohio, unmarried. She has a doctorate in electrical engineering and is a classical pianist. This was her second mission. She was trained to operate the shuttle's robot arm. Judith Resnick was the second American woman in space, Sally Ride being the first. This was Judith Resnick's second mission. Also aboard today, mission specialist Ronald McNair, 35 years old, from Lake City, South Carolina, married, father of 2 children. He has a doctorate in physics from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. This was his second flight. McNair, one of the pioneering black astronauts. Mission specialist Ellison Onizuka, 39 years old, from Hawaii, married with 2 children, Air Force colonel. This was his second flight. His first flight was a secret one for the United States Defense Department, that controversial mission some months back when the Pentagon had a secret mission into space. Onizuka was aboard that mission. Today's mission was nothing secret about it. Among the things to be accomplished was an exploration of some of Halley's comet. Greg Jarvis, payload specialist, the employee of Hughes Aircraft, 41 years old. He is an electrical engineer. Greg Jarvis, the employees of Hughes Aircraft, he was bumped from 2 previous flights, but was finally getting a chance to go. His job was to conduct experiments on how liquids behave in the weightlessness of space. And Sharon Krista McAuliffe, 37-year-old social studies teacher, born in Boston, Massachusetts, a high school social studies teacher in Concord, New Hampshire. She's been a teacher since 1970, was selected from some 11,146 American school teachers who applied to be NASA's first citizen in space. Married, 2 small children. She was to have taught 2 15-minute lessons conducted class in space on day 4 of the mission. Not to be, since Space Shuttle Challenger exploded today shortly after launch. Now, some 1,200 students at the Concord, New Hampshire High School gathered this morning to watch the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger and cheer on their teacher. Their social studies teacher, Krista McAuliffe, was on board, and the mood in the beginning and through the first 30 seconds was jubilant.
We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like to hear about it or not?
Yeah, go on, point down.
The vehicle has exploded. We are now looking at all the contingency operations and waiting word from any recovery forces in the downrange field.
Be a loss to the school, but most of all, it'd be a loss to a family and her friends, and it's just too awful to contemplate. It's just awful. A thing like this would happen.
Schoolteacher McAuliffe's parents, Edward and Grace Corrigan, were watching from a VIP area about 3 miles from the launch pad. The scenes we just showed you were from Mrs. McAuliffe's school in Concord, New Hampshire. Terrible scene there when the joy of the liftoff turned to the horror of the ball of fire explosion. The parents of the schoolteacher, Mr. and Mrs. Corrigan, were watching from that VIP site near the launch pad. When the tragedy struck, the cheers there, of course, turned to shrieks of horror, and the Corrigans clutched each other in tears. NASA officials rushed in to shield them from the crowd and then immediately led them away. President Reagan has postponed the scheduled State of the Union address that was scheduled for tonight until next Tuesday. We're told the president intends to talk to the American people sometime during this late afternoon or evening. Time and form yet to be announced. CBS News intends to carry that live. I was glancing at the clock there because the NASA news conference, the first official word from NASA really since the tragedy, was to have taken place about 23 minutes ago at 3:30 at Cape Canaveral. Then we got word it was postponed until 4 o'clock. And of course, CBS News will be going to Cape Canaveral for live for that NASA news conference if it comes off as scheduled at 4 o'clock. House Speaker Tip O'Neill today, he talked about today's tragedy at a special House session. We may be able to give that to you later on as the afternoon goes along. But for those of you who've only had snippets of this story or who may be coming home saying, what is going on? The space is very dependable in the past. Space Shuttle Challenger, everything seemed to be all right this morning. And then just over a minute after liftoff, trouble, an explosion. No indication of any survivors, and the word at Cape Canaveral is, you've seen the ball of fire. How could there possibly be any survivors? NASA has said it had no indication of trouble. It has had nothing to say about what happened or why it happened. Now, because of our continuing coverage of this disaster, CBS has canceled the school break special scheduled for this afternoon. It will, of course, be broadcast at a later date. That note from our programming department. Now, we were saying that the space shuttle, when it just after lifted off this morning, no indication of trouble, and then it exploded. NASA, the always careful, conservative in the positive sense, National Administration, National Space Administration, has been all day long trying to put together what snippets, what tidbits of information it can, and is now scheduled to hold this news conference in just a few minutes. But here was the launch this morning as it happened on our CBS News videotape.
2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Now control.
Roger, roll, Challenger.
Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. 1 minute, 15 seconds. Full range distance, 7 nautical miles.
Up in a ball of flame, down in fire. NASA said the fine pieces of debris continued to fall into the impact area, that is just southeast of the launch pad, for nearly 45 minutes. Recovery boats and aircraft had to wait until the rain of debris stopped before entering the area. Paramedics parachuted into the water. Some of them leaped into the water from helicopters, seeking to find any trace of survivors. There was no trace, only small pieces of debris. In slow-motion videotape, this is what happened during the critical moments of the explosion. Indication of trouble in the lower middle left-hand side of your screen. Nobody knows what it could have been. Then signs that a larger explosion is coming. And the main fuel tank goes. After the explosion, the two solid fuel booster rockets separated. At least one of them continued to fly crazily out of control in the clear sky, trailing long tails of smoke before it plummeted into the seas. You will see a small, well, perhaps a piece of the right-hand side solid rocket booster in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Once the fireball, the worst of it, there you see it in the upper right-hand corner. What is believed to have been the right side, as you sit on the shuttle, right side solid rocket booster. The trouble, one theory is, began in the left side solid rocket booster. Television pictures of the impact area showed, as I say, only those very, very small pieces of debris. The search continues. We now have a short film showing schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe. First, when Vice President Bush announced her selection last July as the first American private citizen to be a space shuttle passenger, a space voyager. And then later, Mrs. McAuliffe of Concord, New Hampshire, and the mother of two, underwent training in the boarding the bus for the launch. Schoolteacher McAuliffe and the other 6 Americans, looking so forward to what they were convinced would be another successful launch. 24 space shuttle launches, 56 American manned space launches, with never a death before. There were 3 deaths in 1967 on the pad, but that was before launch. Today's the first disaster in space flight for this country. Mrs. McAuliffe was a social studies teacher in Concord. And the other woman, as we mentioned, aboard with her, she was selected from the 11,000 teachers applicants. Now, Judy Resnick, who was the mission specialist, had been selected through a whole different process, part of the what we now call the routine process of selecting men and women as part of the space program. And Judith Resnick, the second American woman in space, Sally Ride had been the first. Judith Resnick talked about what it was like to be the second woman in space.
Is there anything that needs to be said about the second woman in space? The U.S. woman?
I'm very comfortable flying with this crew. We have gotten along very well from the beginning. We work well together. We have a good time in training. I'm very comfortable with the whole mission in general, and I view myself as part of the team. There's 6 of us, and I have about 1/6 of the responsibility, and the other guys have about 1/6, and that's the way we intend to do it on orbit, and we're all very comfortable with that. And I'm very confident of their abilities, and I think they're very confident of my abilities in the areas that I have responsibilities, and I trust them in the areas that I don't know that much about to go do the right thing, and we have that mutual trust among us, and I think that will make for a good mission because we have a good crew.
What does Judith think about going to space?
Well, I'm eager to go.
A long time waiting.
I've been here for 6 years. I think it's about time, the right length of time to be at NASA and working in the system before you go fly. There are a lot of people who have waited longer for flights. There are some who have waited less time for flights. I'm very satisfied with where I am right now. I'm ready to go fly this mission with the rest of the crew, and I hope after the mission's over that NASA wants me to fly another one.
Judith Resnick, 36 years old, from Akron, Ohio, unmarried. She has a doctorate in electrical engineering. She's also a classical pianist. This was her second space mission after becoming the second American woman in space behind Sally Ride. This was to be her second mission in space. And if you say to yourself, well, what was it that these women do up there? What does the men do up there? This particular woman, this woman astronaut, this American hero, was trained to operate the shuttle's robot arm. Now, for those of you who have forgotten or perhaps haven't followed the space program too carefully, that once the space shuttle in normal launches, successful launches, once the solid rocket boosters separated out, the main fuel tank separated out, and the space shuttle itself got up out there on the high frontier, in the cargo bay of the space shuttle, that Canadian-manufactured robot arm. Now, remember, the crew is up in here. This is the cargo area where the satellites that are launched out from the space shuttle are carried, where the Centaur rocket for later this year was to have been launched from. In this cargo bay area, there's a robot arm. The robot arm helps get things out of this cargo bay. Yes, if there's real trouble or for other purposes, the astronauts can get out and take a spacewalk around, and they can work in this cargo bay, but most of the work is designed to be done by the robot arm. And you have to train somebody to operate that robot arm, and Judith Resnick, the second American woman in space, today off on her second mission in space, was an expert in operating that robot arm. That's what she was to do. Among other things, that this particular space mission was to launch and retrieve from the cargo bay of the space shuttle one satellite that was to help study Halley's Comet. There was also to be another satellite launched from that cargo bay, which was to stay out in space and be part of NASA's communications network. That was among the many missions designed for this particular space shuttle voyage. Also, school teacher Krista McAuliffe was to conduct 2 classroom sessions from outer space. The NASA news conference, which had been scheduled for about 40 minutes ago originally at 3:30 Eastern Time and then was put back to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, has yet to start. We are told that it still will be taking place at Cape Canaveral, Florida, but clearly we're past the scheduled time, even the rescheduled time for it, and so we will just have to see when that news conference is held. When it is held, we will, of course, be going live to Cape Canaveral, Florida. President Reagan has postponed his scheduled State of the Union address for tonight to next Tuesday. We're now told the President will be addressing the American people at 5 o'clock Eastern Time this afternoon. President Reagan, earlier in the day, he first said that, first sent out word that he'd go ahead with the State of the Union address. Understandably, the White House...
The epitome of the technology that our country has, and everything that we've ever put into space technology manifests itself in the shuttle program. And for something like this to go wrong, what do you do?
Those tragedies as well were bound together by this one because we all seem to be attached to the space program in one fashion or another. We have an emotional and a political and even a financial stake in it. And we have such an attachment to the astronauts, and especially to Krista McAuliffe, the school teacher who was representing all the school teachers in the country. And in her own way, she was representing the vicarious thrills for the rest of us, too, by going up there. She was a risk taker with the regular astronauts in hopes that she could advance her knowledge about what goes on in outer space and then share that knowledge with the new generation of young students. Jake Garn, a senator from Utah, recently completed successfully a space shuttle orbital flight of about 1 week, as I recall, altogether. He talked about it today with great feeling in the Senate gallery about his friends.
All right. Reaction to what happened today?
Well, it's very difficult for me to talk about it because these were my friends. Mike Smith, the pilot, was my mother hen the first month that I trained. They assigned him to me, go to my classes and help brief me. And I don't know of any time that I have been more shocked or more moved than when my first wife was killed in an automobile accident. And so it's been very, very difficult for me this morning.
What does this do to the space program here and its support on the Hill, Senator?
Well, I have great confidence in the space program. I think it's a remarkable system. And I think we should push ahead after we have determined the cause. Obviously, we should not fly until we have determined the cause of this particular failure. But I think we need to look at all of the successes, the remarkable safety record that the space program has had, the benefits that come from it. And the crew members that I knew so well, I would expect that they would want us to go ahead with the space program after we have gone through the proper investigations and analysis and know what happened.
How should we go about investigating this?
Well, obviously, you have to gather all of the data. It has been impounded at this point. There'll have to be a lot of studies, but there are some superbly qualified experts in this area that I think will be able to determine what the failure was.
Senator, you were on board the space shuttle. You felt that tremendous boost that you got. Now, from the telemetry that we heard, the voice data that we heard, they had just told the pilot to go to full throttle, and he had said he was throttling up. What happens at that moment?
You have a combination of the solid rocket booster power and liquid hydrogen and oxygen in the main tank. And because most of your thrust comes from the solid rocket boosters, while you're still in the atmosphere, you can exceed the maximum dynamic pressure. So the main engines are only at about 60% of power until you get further out of the atmosphere. And they had just been given the command to throttle up, and then you go to 104% or maximum power on the solids, or on the liquids. And so that is exactly what had taken place. They were high enough so they would not endanger the orbiter from too much pressure, and were given that order that they could proceed to increase the power.
What are some of the things that can go wrong at that moment?
Well, you have a very large external tank of very volatile liquid hydrogen and oxygen. And you're just simply, it's like in an automobile, you are putting more fuel. You're pushing down on the accelerator. You're putting more fuel to bring more power. And of course, at this point, we don't know whether it was one of the solids. We don't know whether it was the liquid engines or not. There's just no way to know at this point.
Senator, what was your opinion of the amount of missions that NASA had scheduled for this year? Do you think that they were capable of going ahead with 14 or 15 safely?
Yes, I think so. The major problem these last couple of missions has been weather, and that is something that NASA cannot control. But yes, I think the program was mature enough that, and with the opening of the second pad, Pad B, which Challenger was launched from this morning, with 2 pads and also the addition of the 4th orbiter, yes, I think they were capable of that schedule.
Do you think it's going to make any difference to civilians in space from now on?
Well, I can't judge what decisions NASA will make, but my own opinion, again, after the investigations, we should proceed with the program, and that would include the civilians in space program as well.
As a civilian yourself going in, were you adequately warned that something like this could happen?
Oh, of course. The training is very thorough and very adequate. In my own case, having flown more than 10,000 hours, I was certainly aware that there are dangers in flying. However, I still feel very strongly that I'm much safer in flying an aircraft than any day that I'm on the Capitol Beltway, and I don't mean that to be facetious at all. We kill nearly 50,000 people a year on the in the highways of this country, because of half of them because of drunk driving. I wish we'd pay a lot more attention to that.
Senator, should there have been some way for them, or was there any way for them to get out at this point? Should there have been?
No, I don't think so. In Columbia originally, during the test phase, when just they were sending 2 test pilots up, they did have an escape capsule. The program had been proved safe enough, in my opinion, that they didn't need them in the other orbiters, and Columbia had been modified so that it did not have the escape mechanism in it. This is purely my opinion, but in watching what happened this morning, I would doubt very much, even if you had had an escape capsule on board or parachutes, that it would have been possible to get out with that kind of an explosion in any event.
Senator, in light of all of the delays surrounding recent shuttles and this one, do you think that NASA may have been too anxious to get this one off the ground?
No, I was down on Saturday and for the launch on Sunday morning.
And things like this, as it occurred in the Stretch DC-8 accident in Gander. You know, it generated a big flap about air safety, and this will generate a flap about safety in space. And we've gone through this before in the Apollo fire that killed Gus Grissom and Ed White and another astronaut. But the point is, you have accidents when you're fooling around. You have accidents in automobiles and accidents around the house, and But you've got to expect them, obviously, and one thing that this will bring about, I'm quite sure, is a tightening up of the systems, and whether or not it merits a tightening up of the system, that's what will come out of the accident investigation.
Chuck Yeager, the original American pilot of The Right Stuff, talking today about the dangers of flight. A catastrophic explosion blew apart the Space Shuttle Challenger, apparently sending schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe and 6 NASA astronauts to the fiery death in the sky some 8 miles out from the Kennedy Space Center. Never before in 56 manned space flights had Americans died in flight. 3 died on the launch pad in 1967, but that was on the launch pad as part of the Apollo program. So far as can be determined, we know that at least 4 Soviet cosmonauts have died in space accidents. 1 was reported in 1967 and 3 in 1971. But the Soviet program, which is primarily in the hands of the military and is a closed, not open to coverage program, it's always difficult to ascertain with any accuracy about what has not happened to the Soviets in space. Congressman Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, also talked about today's tragedy.
Space Shuttle carried on its side the flag of the United States, and those who served on her served us, the American people. They served our hopes for scientific exploration and for human progress. But they also served our dreams because they lived at the frontier of what mankind can achieve together.
Tip O'Neill, speaking of the frontiers of space, the high frontier. The explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger followed an apparently flawless launch. It had been delayed for 2 hours because, among other things, of cold weather. Icicles were all over the Space Shuttle and its apparatus, but NASA waited 2 hours, delayed 2 hours, and felt confident as the icicles melted away that the weather, although it was about 28 degrees, unusually cold for this part of Florida this morning, although it had been that cold, NASA felt that after a 2-hour delay it could make the launch and make it successfully. The tragedy defies any easy explanation. You've heard, as part of our CBS News live coverage today, all kinds of theories, an hypothesis here and a hypothesis there, and ideas of where the questions are. But it's suffice to say, as we await this NASA news conference now, that nobody knows. As far as it can be determined, nobody even has any empirical evidence of exactly what happened and why it happened. A quote that we have from the Johnson Space Center in Houston, a source who asked not to be identified, said that, quote, there were no signs of abnormalities on the screens. This is NASA's own many monitoring screens of the flight. There are no signs of abnormalities on the screens as the flight controllers monitored Challenger's liftoff this morning. The source at the Johnson Space Center in Houston said that the blast occurred, quote, unexpectedly and with absolutely no warning. Mission Control reported that there had been no indication of any problem with the 3 shuttle engines. Remember that the orbiter itself has at its base 3 powerful engines. There'd been no indication of trouble with those. That the twin solid boosters on the outside of the main liquid fuel tank, the solid rocket boosters, its twin solid boosters had not indicated any trouble at all, or had there been any indication of any trouble in any other system. And according to this source, who asked not to be identified at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, there was no other indication that the space shuttle was on the verge of suddenly blowing apart some 10 miles high and 8 miles downrange of Cape Canaveral. The space shuttle carrying 500,000 pounds of fuel and traveling at a speed of almost 2,000 miles per hour. For those of you who have heard it during the day, that the Mission Control in Houston or Cape Canaveral, Florida.
As I address you here this afternoon. At 11:40 a.m. this morning, space program experienced a national tragedy with the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger approximately a minute and a half after launch from here at the Kennedy Space Center. I regret that I have to report that based on very preliminary searches of the ocean where the Challenger impacted this morning, these searches have not revealed any evidence that the crew of Challenger survived. The dedicated crew members of Challenger are Commander Francis Dick Scobie, pilot Michael J. Smith, mission specialist Dr. Judy Resnick, Ellison Onizuka, and Dr. Ronald McNair. And payload specialists on board were Krista McAuliffe and Greg Jarvis. All early indications in the Launch Control Center, the Kennedy Space Center, have indicated that the launch was normal up to approximately 11:40 a.m. this morning, about a minute or so into the flight. Flight controllers in the Launch Control Center here and in the Mission Control Center in Houston were polled immediately after the explosion, reported that they did not see anything unusual up to that point. The solid rocket booster recovery ships were immediately dispatched to the area approximately 18 or so miles downrange from Kennedy, along with various Coast Guard and military ships, helicopters, and planes. I have taken an immediate action to form an interim investigating board to implement early activities in this tragedy. Data from all of the shuttle instrumentation, photographs, launch pad systems, hardware, cargo, ground support systems, and even notes made by any member of the launch team and flight ops team are being impounded for study. A formal board will be established by the acting administrator very, very shortly. Subsequent reports on this tragedy will be made by this formal review board. I am aware and have seen the media is showing footage of the launch today from the NASA Select system. We will not speculate as to the specific cause of the explosion based on that footage. It will take all the data, careful review of that data, before we can draw any conclusions on this national tragedy. Thank you.
Mr. Moore has time for just a couple of questions from each center before returning to the effort in investigating this tragedy. Please wait for the microphone and give your name and your affiliation. And we'll start right here with Jacqueline Bolden from Channel 6.
There were some reports that the shuttle perhaps rose a little slower than in previous launches, and there seemed to be a loud noise, and then the noise kind of backed off, and then a rush of noise again. Did you get any reports from anyone else that this seemed different from the people who either experienced it, saw it here live?
I have not heard any reports at all relative to that effect that you just described. None whatsoever.
Okay. Up here in the third row, Michael.
My name's Kevin Hamilton from WGIR in Manchester. The entire Teacher in Space program was designed to introduce more people, specifically youngsters, to the space program. This obviously is not the introduction you intended to make. What do you think the effect, the long-term impact that this is going to have on the youngsters that you were hoping to attract?
Well, I think we'll have to address that as time goes on. And again, I think today, the events of the day makes it much too early for me to speculate on the long-term impacts.
Okay, Al Selstead from Baltimore Sun in the first row.
Mr. Moore, at this time, do you have any estimate of how much liquid fuel was in the external tank at the time of the explosion, and how much explosive power, say in terms of TNT, that remaining liquid fuel might have been equal to?
No, sir, not at this time. You realize what we've been doing since 11:40 this morning is we immediately pulled our senior management together in this program, and I formed an interim board to ensure that all relevant data to this event would be impounded and would be made accessible to the investigative people that will go and take a look at it. I can't answer your specific questions relative to how much fuel was on board at this point in time. The board, when it's formally reported by the administrator, formally formed by the acting administrator, I'm sure we'll go into those kinds of questions, but I can't answer it right now.
Okay, we're going to take one more question here before going to the Johnson Space Center for questions. Here in the right opposite you, Jackie.
Peter Van Sant from CBS News. We received a call today from a member of an academic group who said he was on a tour group that was at the Pad 39B on Saturday night. This group was supposed to get off the bus to take a close look at the shuttle, but was not allowed to because this caller says they were told that a derrick arm had struck one of the tanks on the shuttle and that some repair work was being done. Are you aware of this incident, and are you aware of any problems at all with either the external tank or the two solid rocket boosters?
No, we looked at that on Saturday. There was not even in the same area that of the tank. It was a small box, heater box, that had about a quarter of an inch of the insulation out of 5 inches that was scraped. It was a very minor scrape. It was repaired, and everybody, all the experts in the program, took a look at that, and so we closed it off at that point in time.
Wait for the microphone. I have to have the microphone.
There was no damage to any tank, or this arm did not strike any tank as far as you know?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, we're going to the Johnson Space Center for questions. Just a couple of questions.
Yeah, this is the Johnson Space Center. We have a question from Paul Reeser, Associated Press.
Yes, Mr. Moore. Was there any debris of any description recovered by the vessels, and if so, what was it?
We do not have any detailed debris reports at this point in time. That certainly is something that we're looking at, and we will be impounding all the debris that we recover, and we've set up plans here to store that debris so that the investigating group can go in and look at that and assess that in great detail. I do not have any detailed reports right now on debris.
Okay. Bruce Nichols.
Mr. Moore, with all the delays that you experienced last week, the delay again this week, was there any pressure building at all to try to get this one off the ground? Was the pressure up there? And who made the final decision to go or no go?
There was absolutely no pressure to get this particular launch off. We have always maintained that flight safety is our top priority consideration in the program, and we look at the status and readiness of the systems based on that. We thoroughly reviewed the activities over the weekend and yesterday, and continually reviewed the status of Challenger right up until launch this morning. All of the people involved in this program, to my knowledge, felt that Challenger was quite ready to go, and I made the decision, along with the recommendation from the team supporting me, that we launch.
We're going to the Marshall Space Flight Center for a couple of questions.
Martin Berkey with Huntsville Times. Can you tell me what this does to the schedule on down the line, including the launch at Vandenberg?
No, I'm not prepared to do that. What I have done is basically suspend operations for a few days till we can sit down and assess this. And, you know, we're obviously not going to pick up any flight activity until we fully understand what the circumstances were relative to this morning's launch. So in the interim, near-term time, we basically suspended operations until we get a handle on what our problems were this morning.
Nick Miller, WAFF Television in Huntsville. What part will Marshall Space Flight Center play in the investigation, since the propulsion system was the responsibility of the Space Flight Center here?
Well, they obviously have to play a very strong role in the investigating what happened this morning. As you know, the Space Shuttle program is built around a team effort, not only involving the Marshall Center, but also the Kennedy Space Center and the Johnson Space Center. All of the elements have different responsibilities, and clearly Marshall has the propulsive responsibilities on the shuttle. They will play a very dominant role, as will the other three centers I mentioned, as well as anybody that is contributing to the overall program and has some relevant information to add will certainly play a part.
Okay, we're moving to Washington for questions from NASA headquarters. Okay, there is a problem with our audio circuits to Washington. We are going to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena.
Bill Hines of the Chicago Sun-Times. Mr. Moore, in your opening remarks, you mentioned the appointment of this interim review board and said that it would be making statements from time to time. Not to put any adverse interpretations on this, it sounds a little bit like a news blackout, and I'm wondering if your objective is to consolidate information, what will be the point of issue of all those announcements in the future? And are other people not involved in that review board forbidden to talk?
Well, let me correct your statement. First of all, I said that I had appointed an interim review board. That interim review board is composed of the senior members of the NASA team here to take immediate actions on impounding data. The acting administrator is expected to appoint a formal review board very shortly, and it will be left up to that review board in order to determine its progress reports in terms of their findings. What we have done here today is to move very quickly so that all relevant data could be impounded and all actions that are needed to be taken in order to preserve as much information as we can on the circumstances of this morning can be preserved. And that's the nature of the work that I've implemented today, and I expect a formal board to be established very, very shortly, within the next day or so, by the acting administrator.
This is Roy Neal, NBC News. Jess, you've said, I believe, that future flights are temporarily frozen. The United States space program, as a result, is at a halt. Now, based on your experience, how long would you estimate that this investigation will take? 6 months, a year, before you get back in business?
Roy, it is, as you know, it is very difficult to estimate that time. It's going to be a function of what the board finds were the difficulties today and what corrective actions have to be taken before we feel confident and feel safe to fly again. And I clearly am not in a position to speculate today the length of time involved in making that determination. It will be done just as quickly as we possibly can, but also as prudently as we possibly can and as thoroughly as we possibly can.
One more question from JPL.
Bill Hines again. I've got to follow up on that first question of mine. I understand now that there will be announcements made after the permanent board is appointed. Is that correct?
There will be an announcement, I'm sure, of the members of the permanent board, yes. I believe that will be correct, and then I think that board will determine its rate of reporting based on the progress of its findings.
Okay, we're going next to the Washington NASA headquarters.
Are there any indications of sabotage or attack on the shuttle?
I can't hear it.
I'm sorry, we didn't read that question. And while they're repairing that circuit to Washington, we'll go to the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland.
Mark Weaver, WBAL Radio in Baltimore. Has this raised any questions about how reliable the space shuttle is? Might there just be too many things that could go wrong with a vessel this complicated?
Well, that question, I'm sure, will be asked, and I don't want to speculate on that at this point in time. That's certainly a logical question for somebody to ask.
Ken Carroll from WDVM in Washington. Were there any unusual weather conditions aloft or any unusual weather conditions during the launch?
None that we observed that I recall. We did put up some weather balloons early this morning. We did look at load conditions as we normally do, and the winds aloft looked good. We didn't have any exceedances as far as our load indicators are concerned, to my knowledge, and we thought everything was in good shape for a launch this morning.
Mr. Moore, I.J. Hudson from WRC-TV. Has it become a problem that you have been too good in the past, that the American people have seen flawlessly perform missions on TV almost routinely, and that something like this happens all of a sudden, it hits home even harder?
Well, I don't know how to answer your question specifically. We always strive in every flight that we perform to be as reliable and as safe as we possibly can, and to do everything that we can to ensure that the vehicle and the systems are all ready to fly. Flight safety is our number one priority in the Space Shuttle program. And certainly when you see an event like this morning, we are going to have to do a very detailed assessment of the set of circumstances to try to understand what occurred, and we will then in turn assess the impacts from that to determine where we go in the future.
I think you can hear it over the speaker. Okay, back here at the Kennedy Space Center, we only have time for a couple more questions. Jay Barbary from NBC News in the front row here.
Jess, I would like to know if you know what happened to Challenger. Can we assume that it was consumed in the explosion? And can you tell us specifically what you know now that the recovery crew has recovered in the impact area?
I have not gotten a briefing, Jay, on what the recovery team has found at this point in time. And I have basically looked at the NASA select photos and so forth that you did, and all I can say is that it appeared from those photos that there was an explosion. And that's about all I can say at this point in time.
Okay, we have time for only one more question, and James Fisher from the Orlando Sentinel has had his hand up a long time.
Jess, I realize this is a rather forward-thinking question, but what is the situation with the Rockwell plant about the possibility for ordering another shuttle? Has the assembly line been shut down? What's the situation with that?
Well, as we've discussed in the past, we are manufacturing structural spares for an orbiter system, and that manufacturing process is continuing. We are also buying spares for the current fleet that we have, and there is a production capability there if and when it's decided that that's the next step we want to do, is to move forward and do that. So I think the bottom line answer to your question is yes, that is a possibility, that we could implement a production capability for another orbiter if that were decided to be the thing to do.
Okay, I'm sorry to have to wind this up now. Mr. Moore has to get back immediately. As you know, he's been here since very early in the morning, and there's much to be done. Thank you all. Thank you.
Live from Cape Canaveral, Florida, in the wake of the sudden disaster that struck the Space Shuttle Challenger today, the Challenger exploding and turning into a ball of fire shortly after liftoff from Cape Canaveral, Florida this morning, just after 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time today. That was Jess Moore, the director of the Johnson Space Center in Houston, briefing reporters at the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral, Florida, and bringing in the voices of reporters from various other places in the country. Recapping briefly, the first official word since the accident from NASA: searchers have turned up no evidence of survivors among the 7 Americans on board Space Shuttle Challenger. Flight controllers, all of them, say right up until the time of the explosion, there was no indication of anything abnormal about the launch or the spacecraft itself. A formal panel of inquiry has been formed. NASA says it will not speculate. It will not speculate on what went wrong or even hazard a guess based on the videotape footage of the accident alone. We'll be showing you that videotape footage very shortly. No speculation either on what might be the long-term effect of today's tragedy on the future of the shuttle program. Now, Leo Krupp, who has been with us over so many years of the space...
Kid's airplane being hit by the wind, and it didn't appear that anything could have survived from our vantage point. Basically, it looked like it just tore itself to shreds and was on fire.
At Coast Guard headquarters in Miami, ships were dispatched to the crash area to help search for bodies and debris. Very little debris has been found. No bodies have been recovered. In a moment now, what we're going to do is show you the videotape of this morning's launch, and then slow motion the videotape. As preparation for that, we might want to point out that this was the configuration of the Space Shuttle as it took off this morning. This is the orbiter, the Space Shuttle Challenger. The liquid fuel is in the large tank. The solid rocket boosters off to the side. The shuttle, of course, has 3 engines of its own. The solid rocket boosters and the shuttle's own 3 engines all have to be at full throttle for the liftoff. Then the commander throttles back to about 60-65% of full throttle and then has to throttle forward again. And it was that second throttle forward, just after he had done that, that the explosion occurred. Here was the launch this morning from Cape Canaveral, Florida.
2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Control. Roger, roll, Challenger. Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
Half an hour after the explosion, a serpentine trail of white smoke. It was twisted by the upper wind, and that smoke remained in the cold, clear sky, marking the path of the shuttle's wreckage. The explosion occurred about the time the shuttle was to enter a period of maximum aerodynamic pressure. Wind and other atmospheric conditions placed the maximum force on the outside of the space vehicle. And now what happened in slow motion detail. You'll want to look first for what may have been a couple of little vapor indications of flame. You can begin to see them shortly. This is about 60 seconds into the launch, if you will, and then the larger explosion. You see what appears to be vapor flames at the base in the left-hand side of the screen. Now the main fuel tank begins to ignite and explode. As we wait for President Reagan to address the American people, you will note in the upper right-hand quarter of your screen, what appears to be an entire, or almost entire, there it is, upper quarter of the screen, piece of what is believed to be the right solid rocket fuel booster. Now, when Leo Krupp was saying a few minutes ago that those boosters are supposed to parachute into the sea and are possibly recoverable, you can see how that large a piece of debris, if it can be found, might indeed be very valuable in the investigation. Now, as we await, that's what happened this morning, both in real-time videotape and the slow-motion videotape. And as we await President Reagan's talk to the American people, you may want to ponder a poem called High Flight by John Gillespie McGee, Jr., a 19-year-old American volunteer with the Royal Canadian Air Force who was killed in training December 11th, 1941. And he wrote a poem called High Flight. And it reads, "Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have not dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up, up the long, delirious, burning blue. I've topped the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God." In the wake of the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger at Cape Canaveral, Florida, this morning, shortly before noon Eastern Time, we take you now to the White House in Washington for a talk by the President of the United States.
15 seconds. 10 seconds. Stand by, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd planned to speak to you tonight to report on the State of the Union. But the events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss. 19 years ago, almost to the day, we lost 3 astronauts in a terrible accident on the ground. But we've never lost an astronaut in flight. We've never had a tragedy like this. And perhaps we've forgotten the courage it took for the crew of the shuttle. But they, the Challenger 7, were aware of the dangers, but overcame them and did their jobs brilliantly. We mourn 7 heroes: Michael Smith, Dick Scobie, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista Mikaloff. We mourn their loss as a nation together. To the families of the 7, we cannot bear, as you do, the full impact of this tragedy. But we feel the loss, and we're thinking about you so very much. Your loved ones were daring and brave, and they had that special grace, that special spirit that says, give me a challenge, and I'll meet it with joy. They had a hunger to explore the universe and discover its truths. They wished to serve, and they did. They served all of us. We've grown used to wonders in this century. It's hard to dazzle us. But for 25 years, the United States space program has been doing just that. We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forget that we've only just begun. We're still pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future, and we'll continue to follow them. I've always had great faith in and respect for our space program, and what happened today does nothing to diminish it. We don't hide our space program. We don't keep secrets and cover things up. We do it all up front and in public. That's the way freedom is, and we wouldn't change it for a minute. We'll continue our quest in space. There will be more shuttle flights and more shuttle crews, and yes, more volunteers, more civilians, more teachers in space. Nothing ends here. Our hopes and our journeys continue. I want to add that I wish I could talk to every man and woman who works for NASA or who worked on this mission and tell them your dedication and professionalism have moved and impressed us for decades, and we know of your anguish. We share it. There's a coincidence today. On this day, 390 years ago, the great explorer Sir Francis Drake died aboard ship off the coast of Panama. In his lifetime, the great frontiers were the oceans, and a historian later said he lived by the sea, died on it, and was buried in it. Well, today, we can say of the Challenger crew, their dedication was, like Drake's, complete. The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us for the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God. Thank you.
Live from the White House in Washington, D.C., the President of the United States with a talk to the American people on this day when 7 of their fellow Americans, 7 individual and unique human beings, apparently perished in the fireball that became the Space Shuttle Challenger. Those heroes were...
When the word started coming out, people were really down. Emotions were... few people around the plant crying. People just felt really bad because of something they built, and they really were to see it go and stuff. And when that came around, they everybody was really down about it.
And I feel sorry for all the things that happened over there, and I'd like to tell the families and everybody else how sorry we are.
Crushed. It's very hard to understand that you work on something and have so much pride and know that it happened and that there's nothing really you can do but just the pride of knowing that you worked on it.
Sorrow, wounded pride, utter helplessness. The feelings of the space-age workers who helped the Challenger rise from the California desert. Jerry Bowen, CBS News.
Yes, I think the best part technically is that it's a very well-rounded approach to science and technology, and we get to do a little bit of everything and state-of-the-art, and it's always a challenge.
What happens when you meet a man who's not in the space program and doesn't know who you are, and you say, I'm an astronaut? Does he say, yeah, you're too cute to be an astronaut. Come on, little lady, you can't be an astronaut?
I just tell him I'm an engineer.
You don't tell him you're an astronaut?
Not unless he asks.
You really, you mean when you meet people for the first time? What about the whole business about social relationships? Does it make it, are some men threatened by the fact that you're an astronaut?
I don't know. If they are, they're probably not my friends.
Yeah. Judy Resnick, she would have been 37 years old in April. She's a classically trained pianist from Akron, Ohio. She loved the space program more than I can describe for you here today, and really loved going up into space. I had an enthusiastic letter from her not too long ago. She was saying that she was hoping I could come down and watch this one because she was sure it was going to go off on schedule. We used to have a running dialogue about whether NASA could keep to its schedule or not. She was a absolutely wonderfully dedicated astronaut, and it's a great loss to her family and, of course, to the country as well. It just really is an example of the kind of people that you have in the astronaut program. They are so gifted in so many ways. A PhD in electrical engineering, she was an enthusiastic gardener, she was a classical pianist, and despite her protestations that she couldn't do things better than some of the men, all the men told me that when she operated that big Canadian arm at the back of the payload, she had a great touch, that she had real dexterity. It may have been a result of her piano training, but at any rate, it is a great loss for everybody. We have now a schematic that we can show you that we will superimpose, as it were, over some of the pictures that we saw earlier today. These are the actual pictures, and then the schematic, as you can see, lays over so you can get a better sense of what we're talking about. Could we put that back up there again? Okay, fine. Anyhow, we're watching it now begin to blow up, and as you can see, the shuttle itself was on the bottom. The two solid rocket boosters were on either side, and the external tank is what appeared to come apart, although it's, I must emphasize that Jess Moore from NASA, who knows a great deal more about this than I do, refused to speculate based on those pictures. He's looked on them, he's looked at them, he's listened to all of us as we have made our observations today that it appeared to be a problem with the external tank, and he refused to get into that speculation, as well as he should not get into it, because after all, we want the best kind of investigation to go forward. Bob Bazell at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, right now. Bob, what are they saying out there about the nature of the investigation?
Well, the nature of the investigation isn't something that's being conducted here. This is the headquarters for unmanned spaceflight. However, one of the things that was interesting here is that so many of us who cover space regularly were here because of the Uranus mission of the Voyager spacecraft. And even the most veteran, hardened, experienced space reporter, there was just such a state of shock here among people who had seen so many space launches one after another to see what had happened today. When you're talking about the external fuel tank, and we're just speculating here as we have been all day long, obviously that was what exploded. Yeah. The question is whether it was the first thing to explode and whether it was the thing that initiated the explosion, and I guess that's the key question, because when we do look at those pictures, there's no question that that huge barrel of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, one of the most explosive combinations that human beings can put together, did go up and annihilate everything that had been left of the space shuttle. There's no question about that. The question is what initiated it. One of the things that will certainly be looked at in the investigation, and I'm not at all suggesting that this is what happened, but one of the things that will be examined in the investigation is that there are what NASA calls pyrotechnics. There are explosives on board the shuttle which are designed to blow it up. Now, there are hundreds of safety devices to keep those things from going off accidentally, but there is a man called the range safety officer whose duty it is to watch the shuttle, and in case it starts to go way off course and approach a populated area, he presses a button that would cause the shuttle to blow up. Now, those pyrotechnic devices are one of many, probably hundreds or even thousands of things that they're looking at as a possible malfunction. So
as Jess Moore said before, there, just from looking at that tape, all that you can see is that there was an explosion. You can't see what caused it, and it's probably going to take them an awful long time. One of the things that was interesting to me, having watched so many launches and looking at it, is that there wasn't a single indication of anything going wrong whatsoever. There was talk about the launch looking slow and everything, but if we've done earlier in the day, if you play it back next to normal launches, in fact, it wasn't slow. It has to do with camera angles. There was talks about funny noise, but that has to do with the wind condition. It was a cold day, so that it would have sounded much different to anybody who was there than it would on a normal Florida humid afternoon. There was no indication whatsoever, because if there had been, they would have radioed it to the crew. It would have been some evidence of it in the conversation. The only thing there was the permission for Dick Scobie, the commander, to go ahead to full throttle, his acknowledgement of that command, and then apparently as he just was going to full throttle, there was the explosion. So it's going to take quite an investigation to find out. At this point, there are no clues whatsoever. Tom?
Thanks very much, Bob Bazell, who, as he indicated, he's watched a good many of those, and they are magnificent sights on takeoff, as they were today, as a matter of fact. In the original flight, I remember a man saying it's a real pant flapper. You have no sense of what it's like on takeoff, the sheer raw power of the space shuttle and its attached propellant systems, until you're there and can feel it, as you actually can, as it sweeps across the Cape, the sound and the reverberations on takeoff, and it's a sight of utter majesty. And then today, that sight of utter majesty turned into a sight of utter horror. John Palmer's in New York now with additional information on this national tragedy, which has been going on now for almost 6 hours. John Palmer.
Yes, Tom, a national tragedy it is, a very sad day, and another sad statistic. A total of 11 children now have apparently lost at least one of their parents as the result of the explosion and the downing of the Space Shuttle Challenger, a catastrophic fire that blew apart the Space Shuttle just about a minute and a half after it took off. A few minutes ago, the Associate Director of NASA and the head of the Houston Space Center, in that very brief announcement and took a few questions down at the Cape, he said that the space program, had experienced a national tragedy. He said there was no evidence the crew had survived. It's now after sundown in that search area, about 18 miles off the coast from Cape Canaveral. And as Jess Moore told us about 45 minutes ago, they have found no evidence, no debris, and certainly no sign of any survivors whatsoever. Jess Moore announced that he has formed an interim board to investigate, to review the facts right immediately, and to impound all information, all computer data, to get ready for another more formal board that will really look into the cause to see what happened. He said he would not speculate on the cause of the explosion because he said it was just too early, and as Tom just mentioned, he said that he was not going to speculate on the basis of those tragic pictures we see of about a minute and a half into the flight, the explosion there of the Space Shuttle. Again, he said there were no reports of any debris recovered. He was asked if there was any pressure whatsoever to get this particular shuttle off the ground. It had been delayed several days. It was delayed again today a couple of hours because of the freezing temperatures there and because of some icicles. Its predecessor, the Columbia, had been delayed for 7 days. They had planned 15 different space shuttles throughout this year of 1986. Obviously, they're not going to make that schedule, and there was even some doubt because of the delays of the last 2 shuttles that they were going to be able to make it. Moore said that all he could say is, obviously, from his observation and from ours and from everyone's, there was an explosion. He said, for now, the space program is suspended. He said there were no unusual weather conditions whatsoever. He said they sent up the usual airplanes early in the morning. They sent up weather balloons. It has been noted, though, that the jet stream was unusually far to the south in the last 24 hours, moving down over central Florida at about an altitude of 7 to 9 miles. The speed of the jet stream of the winds there clocked at about 100 miles an hour this morning. It was well below freezing. That doesn't mean that this perhaps had anything whatsoever to do with the tragedy that occurred, but it was a low of 25 for several hours overnight at Cape Canaveral, and that came up at about 10 o'clock in the morning to about 32 degrees, and the launch went off at 11:38 Eastern Time, the explosion following about a minute and a half later. There will be, of course, no State of the Union address tonight. The President, addressing the nation a short while ago from the Oval Office, stated, of course, that he wanted to come and talk about the state of the nation, but because of the tragedy, he said he was pained to the core, he and Mrs. Reagan pained to the core, that this was a day of national mourning. He said of the astronauts, they had a hunger to explore the universe. And, of course, he had those comments, those very poignant, very sad comments to the school children. Literally thousands of school kids all across this country were waiting in their classrooms to see this liftoff because the teacher, Christy McAuliffe, was taking off and was going to give exactly 2, I think it was, lessons from outer space. That's the situation now, kind of a wrap-up to the point. Again, it's after dark, and we couldn't expect really many more developments out of that search area. Let's go back now to Washington and Tom Brokaw.
Thank you very much, John. Manner of little tidbits of information coming away. Bob was witness today announcing candidacy, and he saw that, and then the explosion from his airplane as he was flying over Florida. And about the president's message to the school children of America, it's very easy for those of us who are grown-ups to be kind of jaded about the space program. A friend of mine, a grown-up, who was watching a launch of a shuttle, and with Christy McAuliffe on board, and then the realization that something terrible was wrong.
Would everybody please go back to class at this time? We're asking all students to leave.
The best and worst, of course, of live television coverage coming together there in that auditorium as we were all able to watch what happened to what turned out to be their friend and then 6 other people that we cared about as a nation, the astronauts, as the shuttle blew up. And we were all suspended for a time between a state of belief and disbelief, not quite sure what we were seeing could in fact happen, because we have come to expect so much from high technology. But then the slow realization that in fact that our worst fears now were being realized. I will tell you that as a journalist who's covered the space program for a long time, that's been at the back of the mind of a lot of us. Maybe one of these will blow up on the pad or blow up in the sky someday, and we have to watch it, but we always kind of put it at the back of our mind, never quite believing that it would happen. The astronauts who were involved in today's flight were interviewed before they went off about their feelings and their thoughts. Most of them, of course, not expressing fears because they're not built that way, frankly. Here's what some of them had to say about what lay ahead, they thought.